We start out with introductory remarks and Don Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Bland, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this evening. As candidates, we all appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the college and the sponsoring agencies for hosting this and their wonderful hospitality tonight. I'd like to begin this evening by trying to correct or dispel either some misinformation or some outright bad information. I am not dying of cancer, and reports of my impending death, I assure you, are greatly exaggerated. 13 months ago, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a cancer affecting a person's bone marrow and the blood stem cells' ability to reproduce good, healthy marrow and bone. As a result of that, lytic lesions, or voids in lay terms, develop in the skeletal structure, making the bones weak and susceptible to breaking easily. Last June, I began a treatment protocol of 16 oral chemo treatments, followed by immunotherapy, bone marrow transplant, and I was the donor. The transplant and follow-up therapy lasted from November 1st through February the 9th. I worked continually from my home during this time, and in December, I started spending a few half days per week in the office. With no immune system, I had to be sure that I was not exposed to sick people, especially during the height of the flu and cold season. My oncologists have indicated that the treatments and therapy have been tremendously successful, stating that I have had remarkable success. I've switched over to a maintenance protocol, scheduled for receiving all of my childhood immunizations again, and monitoring. In fact, I go Friday for the second round of those shots. I've returned to nearly all previous physical activities with the exception of running, but I am able to ride my bike. Secondly, I am running for a full 4-year term. I am continually considering options for succession planning so that when the time comes for me to retire, we will be prepared. All options are open to how that might occur, and I assure you that nobody has been promised the sheriff's position upon my departure. I have learned that with his heart, a man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And that was never more evident than when I was diagnosed with myeloma last year. So I just want to say it's been an incredible honor to serve you over the last 8+ years. It's been humbling and energizing at the same time. And with your support, we're ready to go 4 more years and finish what we began a little over 8 years ago. Thank you.
Now we'll hear from Charles Pannell.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad that we've got such a turnout tonight. I'm here tonight and hope to dissuade you that I'm a better candidate for the position of Wyandotte County Sheriff. Unlike some of the candidates, I do have 14 years experience working in various positions within 2 of the 3 divisions of the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office. I believe this time working with the Sheriff's Office has given me a closer view of the day-to-day operations and many of the needs of the Sheriff's Office. I'm a union member. I'm also a Democrat running in a nonpartisan election. I am a military veteran with approximately 17 years of service, with the last few years in the Master at Arms, this being the Navy Security and Police Force, giving me that much more of an insight for the position of Sheriff. I am a single dad who has raised a daughter while residing in Wyandotte County for the past 27 years. During this time, I've earned an Associate's of Science degree at the community college here. Currently, I'm a volunteer with the Wyandotte County Emergency Management Department as a ham radio operator, being called out during severe weather that is approaching in our area to monitor the weather conditions. Throughout my adult life, I've served my country and my county in various ways. A few months ago, I arrived at a junction of my life that a childhood dream came back to life with my decision to step up to serve our county in a new role as the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Marvin BAE.
Thank you all. I'm not a public speaker, but a public doer. I'm originally from Iowa, born in 1949. In 1951, the year of the flood, we moved down here and have been here ever since. My father could found work down here. I'm also a graduate of Turner High School. I graduated in 1967. In 1968, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. The first year I spent at Camp Pendleton, California Staging Battalion. I was in charge of about 15 to 20 civilian and Marine personnel, excuse me. And our duty was to make sure incoming Marines on their way to Vietnam were trained, billeted, fed, and equipped. In 1969, I was stationed at Naval Base Correctional Center, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. I was the A warden or the assistant warden of a jail or a prison that housed at any time 350 to 450 hardcore Navy and Marine personnel, Navy and Marine prisoners. In 1981, I joined the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. After serving 25 years, retiring in January 1st of '06, I was an accident investigator. I was a police motorcycle. I was a street cop and also a crime scene technician. I'm the fourth recipient in the history of the police department to receive, the Medal of Valor with 3 stars. I went into a burning building twice and rescued a guy, and I was treated for smoke inhalation and various burns. During my time with the police department, I was also with the federal government, DMORT, DMORT, that's Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team. I was deployed at Hurricane Katrina down to New Orleans, where we identified bodies and reinterred them with a little dignity. After Hurricane Rita hit, I was sent down to Lake Charles, Louisiana, where I did basically the same job. After 10 years of working with the federal government, I retired, and I'm presently a security guard. I'm with the Unified Government Security Department. I've been there 7 years. My lovely wife, Linda, of almost 28 years, hard to believe. But I have 2 great stepchildren, Angela, who drives for the Kansas City, Kansas USD 500, and my son, Mike, who is a detective with the Edwardsville Police Department. Thank you all very much.
Okay. Silesia Towers.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I'm Silesia Towers. I am 33 years old. I am a native of Wyandotte County. In Wyandotte County, I was an at-risk youth. However, changing my life around, I graduated from a USD 500 school. 3 years at Wyandotte High School, graduated from F.L. Schlegel High School my senior year. In the interim, I have, in completion of 4 degrees, I have an associate's in pre-law. I have a bachelor's in criminal justice with a minor in psychology, master's in legal studies, and I'm a 2L law student currently right now as we speak. I have over 10 years of experience across 4 different states. I started my career in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I was trained by military personnel. I then went into Atlanta, Georgia for the Department of Corrections. After doing that, I transitioned back to Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, and I went into the officer work. When I went into the officer work, I went to the North Carolina Justice Academy field training program in the cell extraction removal team. I excelled in the role as a sergeant for the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office. I then, having to take care of my father, I had to relocate back to Kansas City, so I had to put that career to an end and come here. I relocated to the Department of Corrections in Jackson County, where I was a correction officer, and then I was hired on by the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office. At the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office, within 9 months I excelled. I was the first African-American female on the tactical team in the state of Kansas. I was also trained by the Highway Patrol SWAT Unit. Reciprocity was received by the KLETC, which is the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. I received several recommendations and achievement letters of confiscating contraband throughout the jail and drugs. My mission is simple, it is to ensure that we seek building a strong relationship with the community, with transparency, accountability, and community oversight. It is essential we step up as a collective group of individuals to protect our citizens from harm by lowering the recidivism rate. and making progress towards equity and justice locally in policing by putting an official in place that not only reflects the community but has a no-tolerance mindset with a forward agenda only. We have to become the change that we seek. It is time out for waiting and allowing government officials to be elected into positions with an agenda that does not include our communities. It is time that we stop asking for our change and we start becoming the change that we seek. The next thing that I say, it will be from the officer's viewpoint currently right now with the deputy sheriffs. I would like you to listen as we listen to these questions, as we hear responses. Think of this officer's mindset throughout this whole forum. With minimum hours of training and horrible pay, the equipment is barely supplied, the police cars are minimum and the majority are old. No support services for stress, no bulletproof vests is supplied by the administration for protection at the expense, and no mandatory counseling for officers. This administration rather put, oh, okay. I was getting into it.
Victor Webb could not be with us because of a previous commitment, but I'll let his representative introduce himself.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Gabriel, and on behalf of Victor Webb, I want to thank Business West and the college for sponsoring the forum this evening. Now, Victor's on vacation with his family this week, and I'm honored to provide his introductory remarks. Victor and his wife Denise have been married 29 years, and they have 5 beautiful children, all of whom admire and adore their dad. He and his family faithfully attend Centerpoint Community Church, where Victor serves on the praise and worship team. He's an active executive board member of his homeowner association, and Victor has earned a bachelor's degree in management and human resources from Mid-American Nazarene College, where he graduated magna cum laude, which is Latin for he got great grades. Professionally, Victor began his public service at the young age of 15 when he volunteered with the Shawnee Fire Department. After graduating from high school, he enlisted with the United States Marine Corps Reserve, where he was promoted to sergeant before his honorable discharge after 7 years. Victor is now a retired captain with the Kansas City Police Department, where he served for 28 years. During those 28 years, he earned numerous awards and accolades from the police department as well as the community. Half of his 28 years was spent in community policing, where he used his leadership skills to open communication and build positive relationships with the citizens of Kansas City, Kansas. He was an original member of the KCK policing unit and served as the community policing commander for 5 years. He has attended numerous community training courses. He has led anti-crime marches, attended prayer vigils, hosted community rallies, and organized community award banquets, as well as forming neighborhood crime prevention groups and watch groups. His grassroots efforts and innovative thinking has kept KCK in the forefront of fighting crime and improving community relations. When it comes to improving community relations with the Sheriff's Department, Victor doesn't need to ask, who can I call to help me understand this issue? What does this look like? How would this work? Based on his extensive firsthand experience, he has the know-how to improve community relations. I'd like to close on a personal note. I am not only Victor's treasurer, I'm also his brother-in-law. My wife, the beautiful Mrs. Gabriel, is Victor's youngest sister of 5. I've known Victor for over 30 years. Victor is a man who is passionately devoted to serving others and making a difference in his family, his church, his work environment, and his community. Victor is a doer, a leader, a motivator, a mentor, and a man of character. If you've met Victor, you immediately like Victor. As the old saying goes, the apple does not fall far from the tree, and Victor follows in the legacy left by his parents. And in closing, let me just say that if you elect Victor Webb as sheriff of Wyandotte County, you too, just like his late parents, would be proud of him and proud of your county. I unreservedly encourage you to vote for Victor Webb, sheriff of Wyandotte County.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you. Now we'll move into the questions from the panelists, starting with Elnora Jefferson. And her first question will go to Silesia.
Thank you. Is the war on drugs an effective program for Wyandotte County? State either yes or no, and why. And if no, what is a solution to the pervasive use of drugs by all levels of our socioeconomic strata? and then in particularly by our youth and specifically in the Northeast?
Thank you for that question. No, I don't believe that the solution for the war on drugs is a great resolution for this community as we see the war on drugs continues. First, you have to, in order to address the war on drugs, you have to address the mens rea of a person's mentality. You have to figure out why they first get into the drugs, the mental aspect of it, and what led to that. You have to get into the actus reus of it, and you have to figure out why they committed that certain act or they got into those certain drugs. Until we start addressing war on drugs individually with those individuals and not generalize it as a whole, you cannot address the war on drugs. When we address the Northeast community where I grew up and where I am a symptom of the war on drugs, you have to go into those communities and you have to figure out what is going on there. We have a lack of resources. First of all, we have a lack of school programs. We have a lack of education. You don't even have DARE programs in the school now. So when we address the war on drugs, we have to get into the schools first. We have to get into that school to prison pipeline and figure out what is going on. And it's okay, like I said, we have the DARE programs, but when we go home at the end of the night, how do I feed my kids? Because if I can't feed my kids, I'm going to go out and I'm going to figure out a way to do that. Sometimes it resorts to selling drugs, and sometimes it resorts to selling those drugs into your community. So that is war on drugs. We have to get into the lack of resources, and we have to get into the particular mindset of the individual that put those drugs in that community and how they got there, and then how we attack that going into the further lessons of limiting the use and doing that. Thank you.
Okay. Marvin BAE, you have 2 minutes.
The war on drugs has been with us for quite a while, and it's going to continue. So far, we've been doing Band-Aid surgery. I feel when I make sheriff, I will implement a squad of highly trained, highly equipped individuals, men or women, but they have to pass certain tests. I'm going to call it the CRUSH unit, which is the community resources under the sheriff's hands. I am responsible for what they do. I make sure they do their job. If anything blows up in their face, it comes back on me. What I intend to do is the bad guys, the drug dealers, better watch out, because this unit is to gather intel on gangs, drug houses, execute high-risk warrants, which there are already. I have been told that there is probably an estimated 1,000 high-risk warrants sitting in the sheriff's office right now. Okay, but they have to pass the rigid test and a periodic drug screen on my say-so. If they are with the CRUSH unit, if I tell them they're going to drug screen every other day, they're going to drug screen every other day. I hold them, deputies, responsible for their movements. I am also responsible for everything they do. This should put a dent, along with community involvement. You don't have to be tattletales, but let us know. When I make sheriff, what I want to do is get God back into the picture. Every month, we're going to go to and hold a more or less a town hall meeting at the local churches. You can come and complain, air your complaints. If not, you can come in and say, hey, Sheriff, you and your deputies are doing a good job. Thank you very much.
Charles Pannell.
In my opinion, it's no. Not to the extent that the federal government is wanting. I see it as an issue that is two-part solution. One is combination of community and a unified government to build resources and make resources to help the individuals that are the drug users. We need to reduce the amount of drug users who are asking for these drugs to come in, and continuously going to these drug dealers who are supplying them with a job. We lower the amount of users, it's going to eventually lower the amount of drug dealers. The other part of the solution is law enforcement. We need to crack down on as much as we can locally. Don't worry about what the government or the state can do. We need to take care of our own backyard. Go in there, clean out the areas. work with the community, work with the government, find out where these individuals are in the drug homes, and eliminate as much of this as we can to turn around the individuals and help with the community and the government to see if we can get resources for the individuals to have a better life. Thank you.
Don Ash.
No, a war on drugs is not effective. If we learned anything over the last 30 or 35 years, we better have learned that we can never arrest our way out of this problem. We can never incarcerate our way out of this problem. We can't afford the jails, we can't afford the prisons, we can't afford the burden on the criminal justice system. So there has to be an effective balance established between prevention and enforcement. There are some people in the community involved in drugs that do need to be arrested. They do need to be prosecuted. They probably do need to be in jail or in prison because they've demonstrated they don't belong in polite society with the rest of us. But one of the best things we ever did in this community was to have the DARE program. That's been alluded to here earlier. And all of the research back then in the 1980s and still today indicates that if you're going to be effective at preventing substance abuse by young people, you have got to have early intervention and early education programs. Oh, and by the way, we were building great relationships between the police officers and the children and the teachers and the administrators and their parents and their uncles and their nanas and their papas and everybody else. And then we quit doing it in 2001. Now, here we are, 16 years later, and the kids that didn't have the benefit of all of that good stuff back then are the ones who are now old enough to be on the streets selling drugs, involved in crime, violent crime, and creating the havoc. So there's got to be a balance. I would love to focus on getting back to early childhood intervention and prevention programs in order to improve that situation.
Thank you. Now we'll move to Edgar Galicius of Central Avenue, who asked the next question.
We all know that the Wyandotte County is a diversified community. We have heard the position of the federal government regarding immigrants. In Wyandotte County, everyone talks about being welcoming to everyone. Please help us understand your position on sanctuary cities.
Okay, we'll start with Don Ash.
Okay. Well, my position on sanctuary cities is, once again, I think it's one that has to be balanced. Now, in the sheriff's office, we do not have a policy of stopping people or engaging with people simply based on their immigration status or their perceived immigration status. The only people we're interested in dealing with are those that are involved in crime. And then I don't care what your immigration status is, we're going to need to deal with you and your inappropriate behavior as far as being involved in crime. And I think that's, what our policy is in the sheriff's department and the police department for that matter. I don't think it behooves us to create communities where people can hide in plain sight and sometimes engage in, their various criminal activities. That being said, I'm not going to allow the federal government to come in and federalize the sheriff's office or federalize or deputize the sheriff's deputies in order to be immigration officers. That is not our role. So I've had many meetings with particularly the Latino community and groups that represent the Latino community, as well as with the immigrations and customs systems, immigration and customs enforcement leaders and people here in our area. And we are working very hard to develop policies and training that help us all understand this and how to best deal with it. Thank you.
Okay, Charles Pannell.
I don't like the idea of a sanctuary city, but what I do like is a safe city. the immigration, that's a federal agency's responsibility. As a sheriff's office, our responsibility is to make a safer environment for the community that is here. If somebody's here illegally, great, we'll do what we can to protect you. And if you're not here legally, that's not my concern. My concern is your safety right along with somebody who is legal. That is something that the federal government will have to contend with, is your immigration status, not mine. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Marvin BAE.
Excuse me. When I'm elected sheriff, will my deputies go knock on doors looking for undocumented citizens? No. That's ICE. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's federal. But, on the other hand, if they're incarcerated in our jail, I will notify ICE. That is also, the Sheriff's Department is carrying custody of prisoners, the safety of prisoners, and also the safety of the community, which Wyandotte County has a little over 163,000 population. That would be my job and the job of my deputies. Also, along with the units we have in place, I don't know what more to comment on. This, to me, immigration is federal unless it involves you as the community or somebody that is incarcerated in my jail. Thank you very much.
Silesia Towers, you have 2 minutes.
I don't believe in the sanctuary cities and the immigration either, coming door to door and disturbing people in their personal homes. I do believe when you do commit a crime within this community and you come into the Wyandotte County Detention Center, there should be accommodations for those that are out of this country, such as you can have the ICE unit inside the jail where it's 2 particular officers that are particularly trained, as such as I was when I was in Cumberland County Sheriff's Office. You have to be able to address these individuals in a particular way to find out where they come from, the needs that they need while they're in your jail, because a lot of them don't speak the language that we speak, and it's just not coming from Mexico. They're coming from all over. So I don't believe in knocking on doors and trying to get people out of this community. Is their freedom right? We're supposed to be the United States of America. So if they are here for a reason. They want that freedom. I don't think the sheriff should step into that federal role and knock on people's doors and get into that whole thing if they haven't violated a crime. My goal is just basically to let people live their life within this community safely. At the same time, when you commit a crime in this community and you come to the jail, that's when the sheriff steps in and takes advantage of that situation to get that crime limited how it should be limited. So no, sanctuary city, I don't believe in that, but I do believe there should be a task force within the jail to handle that. I also believe that certain officers should be trained to address that situation right there within the Wyandotte County Detention Center, which we currently lack. But knocking on doors and things like that, that's not the answer. That is an overbound step that we should not take, especially in this community, because it can become very dangerous as it already is. Thank you.
Next question will be from Mary Rupert from the Wyandotte Daily online.
In your opinion, what is the biggest challenge facing the sheriff's office, and how will you address it?
And we'll start with Silesia.
The biggest problem addressing the sheriff office is trust. I can name many issues, but right now it's trust between the law enforcement and the communities. They do not trust the officers serving our communities. They need to have that bridge between the gap and the law enforcement. If they don't feel that you are legitimate enough, as I stated before, to wear that badge and to serve their community because you come from the outside of the community and then you're coming in to serve, they're gonna feel that you are trying to control them. So I believe that the biggest issue is trust. In addition to that, I also believe that the biggest issue is racial bias policing. We address certain communities, especially the Northeast area where I am from, a certain way. We feel the need that we are already criminalized when a lot of us haven't even did anything. So we have racial bias policing. We also have a lack of resources when it comes to addressing that racial bias policing. I think also the biggest issue is not hiring those that reflect our community. We need to start hiring those right here within our community. That way they are able to address those, people trust them more. We also have issues with the budget. The budget is a big issue. We have a $78 million budget, but the sheriff office only receives $26 million. The police officers get $52 million. We have more duties. That's the issue for me. That means that our officers are hurting. They are not being served as they should. We should split that $78 million to 39. The biggest issue is that we are putting the fiscal budget ahead of the community that we are serving. You have to be able to serve more than you are to protect, and in order to do that, you need the resources and you need the budget to do so with the sheriff office. The police department should not have a bigger budget than the sheriff office. We need to be able to serve this community, and we need to do it right. Thank you.
Marvin BAE.
Biggest problem I feel with the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Department is the distance between the Sheriff's Department and the community. They are worlds apart. I don't know what it is, but when I make sheriff, I'm going to get in and get it right. For the simple fact that I don't know if the Sheriff's Department has alienated the community or what, or they just don't want to go out and talk, shake hands. As I said before, when I make sheriff, once a month, we're going to have these town hall meetings. And they're going to start, we got to get God back in the equation, guys. That's all there is to it. Because if we don't, we're going to hell in the handbag, basically. And that's the way I speak. But it will be hosted by different churches each month. You can come air your complaints. If there is a problem, I and my command staff and the deputies with me that night want to know. We're not mind readers. And if there's something that we cannot answer that night, I will personally take your information. I will get the answer to the question you stated that night. Then I will personally get in touch with you, or my undersheriff, Mr. Davis, will get in touch with you. And we will give you that answer. But, thank you. It's got to be, we've got to get the community. I feel this is the biggest problem. Wyandotte County Sheriff's Department here, community way over here. Do we have to take warm showers together? No. But we got to get just a little bit closer. Thank you very much.
Charles Pannell.
The challenges that we have with the sheriff's office, I can describe some of it in one word: expansion. Expansion in our budget that is not equivalent to the police department or the fire department. They've got their own. We're in the slush fund. Staffing, we're way understaffed everywhere. The jail, the road, any part of the sheriff's department, our support staff. We are undermanned. And also our equipment. The police department just got a new fleet of vehicles. We're begging, borrowing, and stealing just pretty much vehicles so that we can have people on the road just to do our job. And the other one is perception. We can try changing the perception of individuals who are willing to accept the difference between the police department and the sheriff's department. We are sheriff. We are not policemen. We are not like St. Louis. We're not like any of the other police departments around this country that are in the limelight doing their 15 minutes on CNN, ABC, and NBC. We're here at home doing our job, and we're catching the hell that everybody else is doing wrong. We have got to hold town hall meetings and prove to the individuals we are not like that. This is who we are. Open your eyes, see us, and understand who we are, and we will do the same. Open our eyes and see you and understand and see what your needs are. Thank you.
Don Ash.
Okay, one of the biggest challenges we have is staffing, but it's not for a lack of budget. everything that we pretty much have asked for, and in fact, there have been increases in authorized strength over the last 8 years, we've been funded for. The commission and the mayor has cooperated, and they have funded us for that stuff. We have done a tremendous amount of things within our approved budget to upgrade our equipment. We just recently upgraded every taser in the sheriff's office. We've added weapons. We've quadrupled or beyond our expense for ammunition so that we could qualify people with their firearms on a regular basis and train them, which hadn't been done, previously. It was sporadic. So the commission and the county administrator's office have been good partners with us in helping to fund initiatives that bring efficiency and effectiveness into the sheriff's office, and there have been many things. For example, increasing the staffing level in the detention center so that we could bring the farmed out inmates home and quit spending $3-4+ million to other communities to house those people. We are now out of the farm out business. We're not farming inmates out anymore. And as soon as the new juvenile center is built and we reclaim that entire housing unit, which is known as DPOD now, we'll be in better shape yet. We still are understaffed. The operations study that was conducted last year shows that, but I don't support all of the recommendations that the study brought forward there. And we do need to continue to work to increase staffing, particularly in those areas where we remain short.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will be from Edgar Galicius.
How do you pretend to deal with the mentally ill and homeless that are roaming our county?
We'll start with Don Ash.
Okay, on the issue of the mentally ill, first of all, we've done a tremendous amount of work over the last 8 years in partnering with our community mental health provider, Wyandotte Inc., Wyandotte Center, embedding caseworkers from Wyandotte Inc. and Heartland Radak, which is our regional drug and alcohol abuse center, because many of the mentally ill that we deal with have co-occurring substance abuse issues. So we have them embedded in the jail, cross-checking the booking sheet every morning for those particular clients that have fallen off of their case workers, radar. They quit taking a medication, they've disappeared into the community, and they haven't been on their treatment plan or staying plugged into the resources that help them stay functioning at a really good level. So we, through that collaboration and with assistance from the state, we developed Rainbow Services, Inc. as a place that the police and even the community themselves and families themselves could divert these individuals over for treatment rather than the police having to come out and arrest them and book them into the jail. Now, homelessness is a much more complicated issue, and quite frankly, I don't think it's one that the sheriff's office or the police department, either one, can solve. But we're certainly willing to collaborate with other social service agencies and other agencies of unified government to help see if there is a role that law enforcement can and should play in that, and then fulfill that role within that boundary. Thank you.
Okay. Charles Pannell.
And I hate to say it this way, but pretty much everything that he has just said. We both work in the same department. He's in the command staff, and I work in court transport, and I do a lot of transports in and out of the county, sometimes to the Rainbow Center, sometimes from the Rainbow Center down to Osawatomie, Kansas. Part of the problem that we're having is what our governor has given us, and that was a slash in the budget, cutting out funding towards Osawatomie, any of the state hospitals. So we're lacking in that, and we're behind the 8 ball as it is. So we're trying to dig ourselves up. Our command staff has come up with a pretty good solution right now, but I think it could be expanded with the proper funding. see if we can't take these individuals off the street and give them a ride over there a safe way if we can communicate. And part of that communication is giving training to the deputies on the street or inside court transport to dealing with individuals with the mental and social illnesses. Thank you.
Marvin BAE.
With the mentally ill, if they're incarcerated in the Wyandotte County Jail, they should be segregated because they have special needs. Some might vary from others, but a mentally ill person has special needs. So if they are in jail, we should work hand to hand with the services that are allowed or allotted to us, to where we can get a hold of these social services. They could come, assist, maybe even to the point of moving them out, moving them to a safe area, because you don't know if they're going to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. The homeless, different. The homeless, I used to work the food kitchen, security at the food kitchen. I've seen a lot of homeless that are off their medication, and they become mentally ill. Do they stay that way? No, because you can tell by the next week or so that somehow they got some medication. They're true, they're right. So can I chastise them for that? No. But something's got to be done with the homeless. The food kitchen is a great start. A lot of people, that is their only meal for the day. That is their only meal. I eat like a dog, but that's their only meal, and I just can't fathom that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there is services out there. We should be able to take care of the homeless and not look down on them. They are human beings, and there are facilities out there that would house them and take care of them. Thank you.
Silesia Towers.
As sheriff, I plan to establish a mental health unit. You have to establish an alternative approach to mental health illness. With this being said, you have to establish and fund a mental health response team to respond to the crisis situations. A multidisciplinary co-responder team that includes mental health professionals, social workers, and crisis counselors, as well as specially trained police officers. This specially trained police officer will come with at least 40 hours of crisis intervention training for police officers. You have to have involvement with multidisciplinary teams in planning and implementation with the response to the crisis. In order to address these mental ill individuals, we have to make sure that we put into the officer's mind that we just can't run to them with certain aggressiveness, as I stated in the prior affirm. You have to go with them in a social service mode. So with these 40 hours of training, it will be a repetition that will go into this officer's mind, and you will get them continuous training on how to address these individuals. You will also work with professionals that are educated enough and trained to deal with mental ill individuals. So with that being said, you have to establish an alternative approach to mental health individuals and get you a task force going into this community where we are, the police officers and the sheriff, that they are responding to a person that is mentally ill in the community. We have this task force go out that specifically address these issues and that mental ill individual without trying to bring them to jail, and we bring them into a situation that they are being helped, that they are getting medicated, and that they are getting sleep. We do not just leave them. So with that being said, you can have a mental ill unit within your jail where they're not being charged, and you basically can bring them in for the night, whether it may be until you get a hold of a psychiatrist or any person on your task force, and you help them out instead of going in and arresting them and just charging them because they don't respond in certain ways, and sometimes they don't understand what they're doing.
Our next question will be from Elnora Jefferson from the Northeast.
And sitting here and listening to your responses, that I'm very appreciative and aware of the complications, complexities of dealing with just society and everyday, you know, the different types of situations we have, and people who meet those situations. One category that we've not discussed would be the category of refugees and immigrants. And so in addition to, we've talked about those people who have addictions and people who have mental illnesses and so forth, would you please paint a picture for us of the sheriff's responsibility and what you see as pro and con in dealing with the refugee and immigrants in our community? And by community, I mean in the county.
Well, we'll start with Silesia Towers.
My issues with addressing the immigrants and refugees, as an officer, my issue was the translation part of it. Oftentimes you have a certified officer that is a translator. We never have that on duty at the jail, or that person that can translate a lot of the languages that come into the detention center or that you address them on the street. So the main issue that we have is a lack of being bilingual communication with the refugees. So we're not able to understand what's going on, what the issue is. So when you come into contact with someone that you can't communicate with, you don't know what's going on, how the story went, if they are a victim, if they committed the crime, it becomes a problem because we don't have those accommodation or those resources in the sheriff's office. I believe that you should put those type of individuals where we start hiring from different communities, where we have that community oversight from those different communities, because it's very diverse in Wyandotte County. So we need individuals that are Liberian. We need individuals that are Laos. We need individuals that are Asian, Mexican, that can speak those different type of languages when they come into the detention center, or when you address them on the street. They need to be able to communicate with them. Oftentimes, I remember being in booking, and we'll come into contact with refugees, and I will have to go to Google Translator. I mean, literally, that's what we will have to do in order to address them. So we need more training. And we need to educate ourselves more. We can't blame it on other individuals because we lack the education of not being able to understand them. So it's a personal issue as well, because you just can't blame it on somebody else that we're not educated enough. You have to be willing to educate yourself as well. So we do need more accommodations within the unified government, where we have those accommodations on call, where we can call and address these individuals in public safety.
Okay. Marvin BAE.
I worked at Wyandotte County Mental Health for the last 3 years in security. And they make a phone call if somebody comes in and we don't know what they're saying, it's a phone call away. I believe it's pronounced proprio. You call them. I don't know if it's a 24/7 operation. It is, okay. I think that is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I don't care what anybody says, because now you're not only, there's people coming into the health department that are Nigerian, South African, Eurasian, everything, but it's just a phone call away. And if they need help, we can help them. If they need incarcerated, we can lock them up. But at least they know what's going to happen. We can get you help. That makes an individual feel better. We got that interpreter, that appropriate. But you're going to jail. At least they know what's going on. And that's the way I feel about it. Thank you.
Charles Pannell.
We have a translation line, and if I understand, it's slightly a little lacking, but it can be expanded, and that can be dealt with in time. We need to do a study and learn what the nationalities that are within our county. See where and then devise up a diversity training of cultural training for our deputies, so that they can understand the religious aspects of the individuals, their day-to-day lifestyle, which is may be a lot different than ours. That I've learned over the years that in various places in the world, hand gestures that may be common for us and acceptable to us are derogatory to somebody in that other community, in that other nation, which those individuals are coming to our country nowadays. We need to come up with flyers with the various types of languages that these individuals have, showing them and telling them the resources that are available in the community. Be an outreach to them. Try to prove to them by this that we are our county, we are our home here as a law enforcement. We are not like the law enforcement from the country that they came from. Many of them are beaten, many of them are starved, many of them, when they are placed inside of a jail, their family has to bring them food so they can exist. I had a couple months ago an individual thank me repeatedly for feeding them because they don't do that in their country. We need to educate ourselves and do what we can to relate to the individuals from other nations that are within our county. Thank you.
Don Ash.
On the issue of refugees, the federal government places them here. The federal government places them all over the country. I have yet to have anybody from the federal government contact me and tell me they're placing any of them here. I have yet to have contact from anybody within unified government to tell me the federal government's reached out to them to say they are placing them here. I have yet to be contacted by anybody from the state of Kansas to state they've been contacted by the federal government and said they're placing any refugees here. So it's very difficult to know on the refugee issue exactly who's here and how it goes, but we have learned that we can learn a great deal from our school district because the kids go to school. There's something like 50 or 60 different languages spoken in USD 500 schools. They're here. But law enforcement doesn't know they're here until we have some law enforcement issue with them. Nobody asks us up front or checks with us on it. And of course, it's the same way with immigration. Now, what I have done is I have established contacts at Bethel Center who works with Latinos and Bhutanese and Hmongs particularly. I have contacts at Lutheran Ministries. I have contacts at Catholic Charities, and I have contacts at El Centro and some of those other organizations that I've availed myself to them. And, you know, if there is a role for law enforcement to play, whether it's in educating those folks, they come from countries where they don't trust the police. They're not going to reach out to me, or the police chief. So we have availed ourselves. I can tell you the police chief has, I can tell you that I have. And we have gone and met with them on occasions. And we stand ready to partner in whatever way is appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, now we will move to closing remarks, and we'll start with Don Ash. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I'm not going to take 2 minutes. Everybody wants to get home. Listen, I just want to say that the voters of Wyandotte County have given me a tremendous honor and a humbling one to serve as your sheriff over the last 8+ years. We've made a number of improvements. We've created a number of efficiencies. Despite some comments that you've heard, we have upgraded equipment in just about every area of the sheriff's office, from the uniforms we wear to the weapons that we have, and yes, even to the cars. Do we get as many cars as the police department? No, we don't. They need a lot more cars than we need. But we've been able to be outside the box thinkers and efficient and effective, and gotten support from mayor, commission, and county administrator to, when we have efficiencies and save monies in one part of our budget, to use it to enhance these areas, you know, where we are short. So we've made a tremendous amount of progress. And as the old saying goes, you know, we're not what we want to be yet. And we're not maybe quite what we ought to be yet in some areas. But thank God we're not what we used to be, okay? And so with your support, we'll continue the professional development and moving forward together of the sheriff's office with this community and all of our law enforcement partners, including our government partners. So thank you once again for being here tonight. Thank you to those that will watch on TV, and I hope you have a pleasant rest of the evening. I would appreciate your vote on August the 1st. Thank you.
Charles Pannell.
I thank everybody for coming out here tonight. I've got some flyers and what I call a candidate letter sitting on the table that discuss a number of issues that I'm seeing within our county. Currently, I'm running a grassroots campaign, and I've hoped I've kind of convinced each of you that enough that I'd win your vote for the August 1st election. If I have, I ask that you, in turn, discuss with your family, discuss with your neighbors, discuss with your friends the type of candidate you think I am, and that you have my vote, that I have your vote, and that you are going to discuss or convince them to vote for me. I believe that I'm a little bit better candidate than some of the other candidates here, but that's just my opinion. I hope I've convinced you that I am. If there's any issues that you think that you would like to discuss with me, on the flyer that I've got handed out, I've got contact information. I would be glad to speak with any of you or any of your family. Thank you.
Marvin BAE.
Thank you all for being here tonight. As I said in my opening statement, I'm not a public speaker, trust me. I'm a public doer. My main goal as sheriff is two-pronged: community, jail. Get the community back with the jail, with the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Department, and take care of the prisoners and the staff that is inside that jail. Eventually, it's going to come to where they're going to double the population of inmates, and they're going to keep the same amount of sheriff's deputies as security. It's going to blow up in their face. Trust me, I've seen it happen. It's not a pretty sight. I'm proactive, I'm not reactive. Try to stop this before it starts. You are hiring me. I'm applying for this job. You are my employer. I am your employee. That's why the town hall meetings, I want to hear any complaints, or an attaboy. Did a real good job, you and your deputies. August 1st is the primary election. I appreciate your vote, appreciate your support, and I appreciate your friendship. Thank you very much. God bless each and every one of you.
Silesia Towers.
As I stated before I ran out of time, I will come from the officer's view and just listen to what they are saying. With the minimum hours of training and horrible pay, the equipment is barely supplied. The police cars, the minimum and the majority are old. No support services for stress, no bulletproof vests supplied by our administration for protection at their expense, and no mandatory counseling for officers. This administration rather put money in technology than in our safety, but that doesn't reduce crime or detour it. Properly trained deputy sheriffs do. We rather build a new juvenile detention facility than a sheriff's training facility, in which the department currently lacks. Research shows that officers have the highest rate of divorce, alcoholism, drug abuse, and suicide. In addition, life expectancy is 10 years less than the average American citizen. We go to work with the thought that some of the people that I am sworn to protect and serve wants to cause me harm. It's often stated that if you can't handle the stress of the job, officers need to come off the street. But how do we expect superior services with an officer that barely can make ends meet? Many say when we accepted the job, we accepted everything that came along with it. Either you deal with it or you leave it. Our government is reactionary, not preventative. We would rather save a few dollars than balance the budget than pay millions of dollars to reverse the tragedy that we could have prevented. I often wonder what would it be the outcome of properly trained officers that wanted to serve and not hiring officers that didn't belong in the uniform. I believe that being an officer is a calling over our life. When we begin to value, properly train, and compensate and elect a leader that wants to serve, then we as a community will receive the type of services that expect and demand from the officers in our community. The government's responsibility is solely to save money, but to protect its citizens is not value in this community. We must pay for training and invest in our deputy sheriffs with presence and guidance. and my leadership. I choose to invest in my deputies and my community. August 1st. Thank you.
Let's give the candidates a hand.